My stepmom took everything after I lost my dad. Then one Instagram comment changed it all. I need to tell you about the night that destroyed my life and gave me back something I never expected. But first, you need to understand what Friday nights meant to me and my old man. Every Friday for 5 years, like clockwork, Dad and I would disappear into garage, not to work on cars or drink ourselves stupid. We had a project, a system. Most people thought we were wasting money on lottery tickets, throwing cash into the void like idiots. They didn't get it. This wasn't gambling. This was mathematics, patience, and faith rolled into one worn notebook. Dad kept everything in that notebook. 5 years of data. Numbers that hit, numbers that didn't, patterns that emerged from chaos. He had charts drawn by hand, graphs tracking hot numbers and cold numbers. The pages smelled like old paper and motor oil. Every Friday night, we'd sit at his workbench under that flickering fluorescent light, analyzing the week's draws like we were decoding the universe. I was 24. Dad was 65, still working at the steel plant even though his back was shot and his hands shook from decades of hard labor. He should have retired years ago, but Cleveland doesn't give you that luxury. You work until you can't, then you work some more. That's just how it is in this gray industrial tomb of a city. But Dad had a dream. We had a dream. Split it 50-50, he always said. When we win, half goes to me for my startup idea, half goes to him so he can finally rest. We both escaped this place where the sky stays gray from November to April and the snow turns black within hours of falling. The garage was our sanctuary. It was warm when everything else was cold, bright when everything else was dim. Dad would crack open a cheap beer. I'd grab one too, and we'd run through numbers. He taught me this wasn't about luck. It was about dedication, consistency, showing up every single week and playing the long game. That particular Friday started like all the others. Dad was in a good mood, joking about the foreman at work who still thought he could push around a man 3 years from retirement. I was tired from my shift at the warehouse, but I never missed our Friday ritual. This was sacred time, father and son time, the kind of bond most guys my age don't have with their dads anymore. We were deep into analyzing the previous month's patterns when she walked in. Elena, my stepmother, though I never called her that. She'd been living in our house for 3 years, sleeping in my mother's bed, acting like she belonged. Dad married her after knowing her for 8 months. She was from Bulgaria, from some city called Plovdiv that I'd never heard of. She was 38 to his 62 when they met. Do the math. When Dad was around, Elena played her part perfectly. She'd smile with those white teeth, touch his shoulder, call us her boys. That night, she glided into the garage with that same performance smile plastered on her face. She told Dad we were wasting money again, throwing away on dreams. But her tone was light, teasing. She ran her hand across his shoulders, squeezed him gently. He smiled up at her like she was the best thing that ever happened to him. My stomach turned. But here's what Dad didn't see. The second he turned back to his notebook, back to his beloved system, her face changed. The mask slipped. She looked at me with pure contempt. Her eyes went cold and hard like frozen mud. She leaned in close enough that I could smell her perfume, something expensive that Dad definitely paid for, and whispered so only I could hear. She told me I should find a real job instead of dreaming, that these lottery tickets were mythology, that I was wasting my time and Dad's money. The venom in her voice was shocking. This woman who cooed and smiled for my father hated me with an intensity that took my breath away. I knew why. Dad had told me about the deal, the 50-50 split. She knew about it too, had probably overheard us talking about it dozens of times. And she hated it. In her mind, every dollar Dad's money should flow directly to her. I was the obstacle, the son who refused to disappear. I didn't say anything back. What could I say? Dad loved her. He was happy, or at least he seemed happy, and I wasn't going to be the one to poison that. So I took her venom and swallowed it down like bad medicine. After she left, Dad seemed lighter somehow. He opened up about something that had been bothering him. He said Elena had been pressuring him for months, telling him she was scared about what would happen if he died. She didn't want to end up homeless. she said. She needed security. She needed protection. So Dad, being the good man he was, had done something. Last month, he added her name to the house deed. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Those words meant nothing to me at the time. I just nodded, feeling uneasy but not knowing why. Dad explained that it meant if anything happened to him, the house would automatically go to Elena. No probate, no waiting, no uncertainty. She'd finally have her security, he said. Now she could relax. Something in my gut twisted when he told me this. Some instinct screaming that this was wrong, that we just made a terrible mistake. But I looked at my father's face, saw how relieved he was that his wife felt safe, and I kept my mouth shut. He loved her. He was trying to do right by her. Who was I to throw gasoline on that? So I smiled and told him it was good. That Elena deserved to feel secure. The lie tasted like copper on my tongue. We went back to our numbers. Dad had a good feeling about that night's ticket. We'd been tracking a cluster of numbers that seemed overdue. Statistical probability suggested they were coming up soon. He filled out the ticket by hand, like always, paid for it with cash from his wallet, like always, and we scanned it into the lottery app to check later. Then we waited. We talked about the future, about my business idea for a small tech consulting firm, about his plans to finally visit Alaska, something he wanted to do since he was a kid, about getting out of Cleveland and its gray skies and grayer prospects. These Friday nights were more than lottery tickets. They were hope. They were possibility. They were the belief that life could be different. Around 11 o'clock, Dad pulled out his phone to check the drawing. His hand shook slightly as he opened the app. He always got nervous during this part, even after 5 years. The ritual of hope is both beautiful and terrifying. He scanned our ticket. The app made a sound, not the usual sad trombone of defeat. Something different, a fanfare, digital trumpets and celebration. Dad's face went white, then red, then white again. He thrust the phone at me with a shaking hand. I looked at the screen and felt my brain short-circuit, trying to process what I was seeing. Jackpot, $18 million. We'd won. After 5 years of dedication, of faith, of showing up every single Friday night, no matter what, we'd actually won. $18 million. $9 million each. Enough to change everything. Enough to escape. Enough to make every dream real. Dad started crying. I'm not talking about getting misty-eyed. I'm talking about full sobbing, the kind that comes from decades of exhaustion and disappointment finally breaking open into joy. I grabbed him and hugged him hard, both of us shaking, both of us unable to speak. That's when I noticed Elena standing in the doorway. I don't know how long she'd been there, but she'd heard. She'd definitely heard. Dad was shouting about how we'd done it, how the system worked, how we were splitting it 50-50, and go to the lawyer first thing tomorrow morning to make it official. Elena smiled, but it wasn't the warm smile she gave Dad during their little performances. This was different. Her eyes were calculating. Cold. She was looking at that phone screen like a wolf looking at meat. She wasn't happy for us. She wasn't celebrating our victory. She was already counting money that hadn't been distributed yet. Her eyes narrowed slightly when Dad mentioned the 50-50 split. Just a tiny movement, barely perceptible. But I saw it, that predator focus, that instant calculation of angles and opportunities. But I was too happy to care. We'd won. We'd actually won. Nothing else mattered. We stayed up late that night, making plans. Dad wanted to quit the steel plant immediately. I told him to wait, to be smart about it, to not draw attention until we claimed the prize and gotten everything legal and proper. He agreed. We decided we'd go to a lawyer first thing Monday morning, get the split documented officially, then go claim the prize together. Dad kept saying it over and over. 50-50. Half for me, half for him. Our deal, our system, our victory together. I remember feeling a completeness that night that I'd never felt before. Like everything had led to this moment. Like all the gray years in Cleveland, all the hard work, all the patience had been rewarded by something bigger than us. Call it fate. Call it mathematics. Call it whatever you want. We'd won. Around 2 in the morning, we finally headed to bed. But Dad stopped me before I went to my room. He said we needed to do one more thing. Something important. He pulled out the lottery ticket and grabbed a pen from the kitchen counter. He told me we should sign the back of the ticket right now. That's what you're supposed to do when you win big. Sign it immediately so nobody can claim it but you. He said we'd both sign it. Make it official that we were splitting this thing 50-50. Partners all the way. He was about to put pen to paper when Elena called from upstairs. Something about needing help with something. Dad said he'd sign it first thing in the morning, that it was safe in his wallet for now. He tucked the unsigned ticket back into his wallet, set it on the kitchen counter, and headed upstairs. I went to bed feeling like I was floating. We'd won. We'd actually won. And tomorrow we'd sign that ticket and make everything official. Those were the last normal moments of my life. I woke up around 3:30 to a sound I'll never forget. A heavy thud from Dad's bedroom, then silence. Not screaming, just a silence. That silence was worse than any scream. I ran. Dad's bedroom door was open. He was on the floor beside the bed, on his back, clutching his chest. His face was gray and twisted with pain. The stress, the excitement, the sheer emotional overload of the evening had triggered a massive heart attack. His body had finally given out after 65 years of hard labor and one night of pure, overwhelming joy. But here's what I remember most clearly. Elena was standing near the doorway, not kneeling beside him, not rushing to help, just standing there, looking down at him with an expression I couldn't read in my panic. Then she moved, but not toward Dad. She walked past his convulsing body to the dresser, grabbed his wallet from where he'd emptied his pockets before bed, opened it with steady hands, pulled out the lottery ticket, the unsigned lottery ticket, and slipped it into the pocket of her robe. The whole thing took maybe 5 seconds, maybe less. She did it like someone checking their phone. Casual, mechanical, like it was the most natural thing in the world to secure assets before calling for help. Only after the ticket was safely in her pocket did she pull out her phone. I was already on the floor beside Dad, grabbing his hand, screaming at him to hold on. Elena stood there for what felt like forever, but was probably 10 seconds, maybe 15, just looking at us, her thumb hovering over her phone screen. Then she dialed 911. Her English was suddenly perfect. No accent, no hesitation. She gave our address clearly and efficiently, described the symptoms in clinical detail, told them to hurry, but her voice held no urgency, no fear, just information being transmitted. I was too panicked to process any of this at the time, too focused on Dad, on his gray face and his weak grip, and the way his eyes were starting to lose focus. I held his hand and told him the paramedics were coming, that he was going to be okay, that we still had our future, Alaska and freedom, and everything we dreamed about. His eyes found mine. He tried to say something, but couldn't get the words out. His grip on my hand was weak, getting weaker. I think he was trying to tell me about the ticket, about signing it, about making sure I got my half. But the words wouldn't come. Elena stood in the corner, phone still in her hand, watching, just watching. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. They worked on him right there in the bedroom, then loaded him onto a gurney and rushed him to Metro Hospital. I rode in the ambulance, holding his hand, watching the monitors spike and dip in patterns I didn't understand but knew were bad. Elena followed in Dad's truck. At the hospital, they rushed him into emergency surgery. A doctor with tired eyes and 2 days stubble told us it was a massive coronary event. They were doing everything they could. We should prepare ourselves for any outcome. I sat in that waiting room under fluorescent lights that hummed like dying insects. The plastic chairs were uncomfortable. The coffee from the machine tasted like burned dirt. Time moved strangely, both too fast and too slow. Elena sat across from me. She wasn't crying. She was staring at her phone, scrolling through something. At one point, she got up and made a call, speaking quietly in Bulgarian. I didn't think anything of it then. I was too scared, too focused on Dad. Around 6 in the morning, the same tired doctor came out. His face told me everything before his mouth did. Dad hadn't made it. The damage was too extensive. They'd done everything possible, but his heart had given out completely. He was gone. The world tilted. Everything went gray and muffled like someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. Dad was dead. The man who'd raised me, who'd taught me about systems and patience and hope, who'd been my best friend for 24 years, was gone. And we'd never gotten to split that money. Never gotten to hire the lawyer. Never gotten to make it official. The funeral was 3 days later. A cold ceremony in a cold chapel for a man who deserved warmth. Some guys from the plant showed up. A few distant relatives. Elena played the grieving widow perfectly, dabbing at her eyes with tissues, accepting condolences with dignified sadness. I was numb, moving through the motions, shaking hands, accepting empty platitudes about how Dad was in a better place now. I didn't believe it. There was no better place. There was just absence. After everyone left, after the last casserole dish had been dropped off and the last awkward hug had been endured, I sat with Elena in the living room. The house felt wrong without Dad in it. Too quiet, too empty. I needed to talk about practical things. About the lottery ticket. About our agreement. About the 50-50 split that Dad had promised me the night he died. I asked Elena where the ticket was. Reminded her that Dad and I had an agreement. That half the money was supposed to be mine, for my startup, for my future. That this was what Dad wanted. Elena looked at me for a long moment. Then something shifted in her face. The mask of the grieving widow fell away completely. What replaced it was cold and calculating and completely in control. She told me there was no agreement. Those were just words from a dead man. She had the lottery ticket now. It was in her possession, purchased by her husband and therefore legally hers. The house was hers too, she reminded me. Joint tenancy meant it had passed to her automatically the moment Dad died. I had no legal claim to anything. Her accent had changed. The soft, slightly broken English she usually used was gone. She spoke perfectly, precisely, like someone who'd been acting the whole time. Then she said the words that broke something fundamental inside me. She told me I was nobody. I had no rights here. This was her house now. Her money. Her new life. And I had 24 hours to pack my things and get out. I couldn't process it. This woman who'd been living in our house for 3 years, who'd smiled and called me her boy, who pretended to care, was throwing me out the day after we buried my father. She'd waited. She'd actually waited until he was in the ground before revealing who she really was. I asked about the 50-50 split one more time. Practically begged. This was what Dad wanted. This was our dream together. She smiled. Not the warm fake smile. The real one. The predator showing its teeth. She told me dreams were for children. This was the real world. And in the real world, she'd won. I had nowhere to go. No savings to speak of. My job at the warehouse barely covered my basic expenses, and I'd been living at home to save money for Startup Dad, and I had planned to fund together. I packed my clothes into a duffel bag, my laptop, a few books, the photograph of me and Dad from my high school graduation, both of us grinning like idiots because the future seemed bright back then. Elena watched me pack. She leaned against my bedroom doorframe, arms crossed, making sure I didn't take anything she considered hers. I grabbed Dad's old notebook, the one with all our lottery data. She didn't stop me. She didn't care about some ratty notebook. She had $18 million. What did she need with Dad's handwriting and dreams? 23 hours after she'd given me the ultimatum, I walked out of a house I'd grown up in. The house where my mother had died when I was 12. The house where Dad and I had built our Friday night ritual. The house that was supposed to be my inheritance, my security, my home. It was snowing. That wet, heavy Cleveland snow that soaks through everything. The sky was the color of old concrete. I stood on the sidewalk with my duffel bag, watching my breath turn to fog, feeling the cold seep into my bones. I looked up at my bedroom window. The light was on. Elena was up there, probably going through everything, making sure I hadn't taken anything valuable, making sure her claim was complete and total. She'd won. She played a long game I hadn't even known was being played. 3 years of performance. 3 years of pretending to care about Dad. of playing the loving wife, all while waiting for exactly this opportunity. And I had nothing. No home, no money, no father, no future. Just a duffel bag, a dead phone battery, and a worn notebook full of dreams that had come true for about 6 hours before turning to ash. The snow kept falling. I started walking. I didn't know where I was going. Just away from the house, away from Elena, away from everything I'd lost. I didn't know it then, but that walk in the snow was the beginning of something. Not the end, the beginning, because predators, even smart ones, always make mistakes eventually, and Elena had just made hers. I spent the first week after Dad's funeral sleeping in my car, a 2008 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and a heater that only worked when it felt like it. Cleveland in February is not the place to be homeless. The cold seeps into your bones and stays there, making you wonder if you'll ever feel warm again. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Dad had always taught me to fight for what was right, to stand up when you got knocked down. So I scraped together every dollar I had, borrowed $200 more from a buddy at the warehouse, and found a lawyer. His name was Mitchell Green. His office was above a pizza place on the east side, the kind of spot where the carpet hasn't been cleaned since the 90s, and everything smells like old coffee and broken dreams. But he was cheap, and he took walk-ins, which was about all I could afford. I told him everything. The Friday night ritual, the winning ticket, Dad's death, Elena stealing the ticket, and kicking me out, the 50-50 agreement Dad and I had. Mitchell listened, taking notes on a legal pad, his face getting more and more neutral as I talked. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes like a man who'd seen this story 1,000 times before in 1,000 different variations. He explained the reality to me in terms that were brutally clear. The house was gone. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship meant it passed directly to Elena the moment Dad died. No probate, no contest, no wiggle room. It was ironclad. That ship had sailed. As for the lottery ticket, that was even worse. He asked me if the ticket was signed. I told him no. Dad was going to sign it the next morning, but never got the chance. Mitchell winced like I'd just told him I'd shot myself in the foot. He explained that an unsigned lottery ticket is what they call a bearer instrument. Whoever physically holds it owns it, like cash. If you hand someone a $20 bill, it's theirs now. Doesn't matter if you can prove you earned it. Possession is ownership. Elena claimed she bought the ticket herself. I had no video proof that Dad paid for it. He always paid cash, never kept receipts for something as small as lottery tickets. It was her word against mine, and she had the physical ticket in her possession. Mitchell told me I could try to sue, but I'd lose. Worse than lose. I'd end up owing her legal fees on top of my own. I'd be buried in debt for years, fighting a battle I had zero chance of winning. The American legal system, he said, doesn't care about what's fair. It cares about what you can prove in court. I sat in that office above the pizza place and felt something fundamental break inside me. The system I believed in, the justice I thought existed. It was all just theory. In practice, Elena had won. She played by the rules that mattered, and I hadn't even known we were playing a game. Mitchell gave me one piece of advice as I left. He told me to move on, find a new life, let it go. Holding on to anger and injustice would only poison me from the inside out. He'd seen it happen to hundreds of clients over the years. The ones who let go survived. The ones who held on destroyed themselves. I thanked him, paid his consultation fee, and walked out into gray February afternoon, knowing I was completely and utterly beaten. For months past, for months of survival mode, of living day to day, of letting go of everything I used to think mattered. I found a room in a weekly motel on the west side, the Traveler's Rest Inn, which was neither restful nor an inn. It was a concrete box with paper-thin walls where you could hear your neighbors arguing or worse. The bathroom had black mold in the corners. The bed sagged in the middle like a hammock, but was cheap, and they didn't ask questions, and I could pay week to week. I worked for Amazon doing delivery routes, then Uber Eats when the delivery routes were full, then DoorDash. Sometimes all three in the same day, bouncing between apps, chasing whatever paid. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning, grab terrible coffee from the gas station on the corner, and spend the next 12 hours driving in circles delivering other people's stuff to other people's homes. The coffee from that gas station became the taste of my new life, burnt and bitter and somehow still watery. $3 for a large that would go cold in my cup holder as I navigated to addresses I could barely read on my cracked phone screen. I must have drunk 1,000 cups of that coffee over those 4 months. It all tasted the same. Like defeat, the work was mind-numbing. Drive here, drop this off, drive there, pick this up. Smile at strangers who didn't see you as a person, just a function, a delivery mechanism, an app made flesh. I'd finish around 6 or 7 at night, grab some fast food that I'd eat cold in my motel room, and collapse into that sagging bed feeling like I'd aged 10 years in a single day. This was my life now. This was what remained after Elena had taken everything. And the worst part was knowing that somewhere across town, she was living like a queen on money that should have been split with me. I know what you're thinking. I should have moved on, found a new dream, let it go like Mitchell the lawyer said. But here's the thing about injustice. It doesn't let you go. It sits in your chest like a stone and gets heavier every day. You can ignore it, but you can't make it disappear. So I did something that was probably unhealthy, definitely obsessive. I created a fake Instagram account and started following Elena. The username was something generic, random letters and numbers, profile picture stolen from some stock photo site, just another faceless account in the void. She accepted the follow request immediately because she was building her new life as an influencer. More followers meant more validation, meant more proof that she'd made it. Her feed was a horror show, not because it was bad, but because it was good. She looked happy, successful, free. She posted about self-care and new beginnings and finding yourself after tragedy. She used hashtags like self-made woman and new chapter and living my truth. Every post was carefully filtered, carefully captioned, carefully crafted to show the world that Elena was thriving. She'd gotten Dad's life insurance payout. Apparently, he'd had a policy through the steel plant that named her as beneficiary. Another thing he'd done trying to make her feel secure. Another weapon she'd use against him. Against me, that money, combined with selling off Dad's truck and his tools, and everything else he'd owned, had set her up nicely even before the lottery money came through. She posted photos of herself at expensive restaurants, at the art museum, at yoga classes downtown, living the cosmopolitan Cleveland life that existed in exactly 3 neighborhoods and nowhere else in the city. She was spending money like it was going out of style, building this image of herself as a sophisticated woman who'd overcome tragedy and emerged stronger. The worst posts were the ones where she threw away Dad's things. She didn't say that's what she was doing, of course. She framed it as decluttering and making space for new energy. But I recognized Dad's old armchair in one photo, sitting on the curb with a free sign taped to it. His workbench in another photo, being loaded into a junk truck. She was erasing him, systematically removing every trace of his existence in the house like he'd never been there at all. I'd scroll through her feed in my motel room at night, the bright screen the only light in the darkness, and feel rage build in my chest like pressure in a boiler. She'd stolen everything, and now she was parading it around like she'd earned it, like she deserved it, like Dad had been just an inconvenient obstacle between her and the life she really wanted. But what could I do? Mitchell had been clear. I had no legal recourse, no way to fight, no way to win. All I could do was watch and seethe and slowly poison myself with impotent anger. Then she made a mistake. It was late April, almost 4 months to the day since Dad died. I was in my motel room after a brutal 14-hour shift, eating cold Chinese food from a delivery I'd done 6 hours earlier. My feet hurt. My back hurt. Everything hurt. I was scrolling through Elena's Instagram out of habit more than anything else. That nightly ritual of self-torture I couldn't seem to break. She'd posted a new story. A selfie with dramatic lighting, hair and makeup done perfectly, looking like she was about to go out for the evening. The caption read, "Finally free, ready for new love." Finally free, like Dad had been in prison. Like those 3 years of marriage had been a sentence she'd served. The casualness of it made me want to put my fist through the motel room wall. But then I saw something in the comments. Most of her comments were the usual Instagram garbage. Fire emojis and you go girl, and looking gorgeous queen. But one comment was different. Longer. Written in English, but with the kind of grammar mistakes that suggested it wasn't the commenter's first language. The username was bg_girl_Sophia. The profile picture was private. But the comment itself was a bomb dropped in the middle of Elena's carefully curated new life. It said, "Mama, stop lying. Dad Ivan is furious. He is still waiting for divorce papers in Plovdiv. You abandoned us for money." I read it 3 times. Then 4. Then 5. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. Mama, Dad Ivan, divorce papers. Plovdiv. Plovdiv was a city in Bulgaria where Elena was from. She'd mentioned it exactly once in the 3 years I'd known her, back when she first moved in, and Dad had asked about her hometown. But this comment was suggesting something impossible, something that would change everything. It was suggesting Elena was still married to someone named Ivan in Bulgaria, and that she had a daughter who just called her out publicly for abandoning her family. My hands were shaking as I took a screenshot. The motel room suddenly felt smaller, hotter, like all the air had been sucked out. I stared at that comment, reading it over and over, my brain trying to process the implications. If Elena was already married when she married Dad, then her marriage to Dad was invalid, void, fake, which would mean she wasn't his legal widow, which would mean she had no claim to his house or his estate or anything else, which would mean everything she'd taken was based on a fraud. I checked the timestamp. The comment had been posted 2 minutes ago. As I watched, the number of likes on it started going up. Other people were seeing it, reacting to it. This wasn't going to stay quiet. Then, as I sat there holding my phone with trembling hands, the comment disappeared. Deleted. I refreshed the story. The comment was gone. I clicked on the bg_girl_Sophia profile. Account not found. Elena had deleted the comment and blocked the user, probably within seconds of seeing it. But I had the screenshot, clean and clear and time-stamped. Proof that someone claiming to be Elena's daughter had just accused her of abandoning a husband and family in Bulgaria. I sat in that motel room with my cold Chinese food and my bruised feet and my broken life, staring at a screenshot that might mean nothing or might mean everything. The rational part of my brain, the part that had listened to Mitchell the lawyer and tried to move on, was screaming at me not to get my hopes up. This could be a misunderstanding, a case of mistaken identity, some internet troll messing with Elena for reasons that had nothing to do with me. But the other part of my brain, the part that still remembered Friday nights in the garage with Dad, the part that still believed in justice even after 4 months of evidence to the contrary, that part was whispering something different. What if it's real? What if Elena has been lying about everything from the start? What if she's not a widow but a bigamist? What if everything she took was based on a marriage that never legally existed? I looked at the screenshot again. Read the words one more time. Dad Ivan is furious. He is still waiting for divorce papers. Still waiting. Present tense. Not was waiting or waited. Still. Ongoing. Current. Like the marriage in Bulgaria was active. Like the divorce had never happened. Like Elena had left one husband to marry another, without bothering to end the first marriage legally. The implications crashed over me like a wave. If this was true, if Elena was committing bigamy, then she'd also committed immigration fraud. You can't get a marriage visa to the United States if you're already married. She would have had to lie on her visa application, and that's a federal crime. That's the kind of thing Homeland Security cares about. That's deportation territory. That's prison territory. Suddenly, the fortress Elena had built around herself had a crack in it. A tiny crack, barely visible, but a crack nonetheless. And I was holding the crowbar. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on that sagging motel bed with my phone in my hands, staring at a screenshot of a deleted comment, watching the sun come up through the thin curtains, feeling something I hadn't felt in 4 months. Hope. Dangerous, foolish, probably misguided hope. But hope nonetheless. By the time the light turned gray and then yellow and it was officially morning, I'd made a decision. I was going to find out the truth. Not for revenge, though that was definitely part of it. Not for the money, though God knows I needed it. But for Dad, for the man who taught me about systems and patience, and never giving up on a dream. For the man who'd been betrayed by someone he loved and trusted. I was going to find out if Elena was who she claimed to be, and if she wasn't, I was going to take back everything she'd stolen. The gas station coffee tasted different that morning. Still burnt and bitter and watery. But now it tasted like fuel, like ammunition, like the beginning of something. I opened my phone and looked at the screenshot one more time. Studied every word, every detail. That username, that profile picture before it disappeared. That city name, Plovdiv, Dad Ivan. And I said out loud, to no one but myself and the mold-spotted walls of my motel room, "You're not Dave's widow. You're Ivan's wife." Finding a lawyer who specializes in international marriage fraud is not as easy as you think. Turns out it's a pretty niche field. Most attorneys deal with divorces or immigration or criminal defense. But the intersection of all three, that's specialist territory. That's expensive territory. I found Mr. Silver through 3 hours of Google searches in the public library because my phone data was almost maxed out for the month. His website looked legitimate. More importantly, his bio mentioned cases involving visa fraud and bigamy. He had an office downtown in one of those renovated industrial buildings that used to make steel and now makes lawyer fees. I called and explained the situation. Kept it brief. Screenshot of a comment suggesting my stepmother was still married to someone in Bulgaria. Needed official documentation to prove it. The receptionist put me on hold for 2 minutes. Then Silver himself picked up. His voice was gravelly, like he'd spent 40 years smoking cigars and arguing in courtrooms. He told me to come in, bring the screenshot, bring any documentation I had about Elena. We'd talk. His office was nothing like Mitchell Green's sad little space above the pizza place. This was professional, clean, the kind of place that charged by the quarter hour and made sure you knew it. Silver was in his 60s, gray hair cut military short, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. He looked at my screenshot for about 30 seconds, then looked at me. He asked me point blank if I could afford him. His retainer for international document research was $12,000. That would cover the official request to Bulgarian government offices, translation services, authentication of documents, and his time coordinating everything. If we found what we were looking for and needed to take legal action, that would be additional. $12,000. I had maybe $800 in my bank account. I told him I'd get the money. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. He said he'd hold the case open for 1 week. After that, if I couldn't come up with a retainer, he'd have to move on. He was sorry, but this was business. I understood. Everything is business. I walked out of that office knowing I was about to do something desperate. But desperate times, right? That's what they say. Desperate times call for desperate measures. And I was so far past desperate, I couldn't even see it in the rearview mirror anymore. I sold everything. My laptop went for $300 on Craigslist. My gaming console and games, another $200. My dad's old watch that he'd given me for graduation. The one thing I kept that had real sentimental value. I sold to a pawn shop for $400. The guy behind the counter knew I was desperate and lowballed me. But I took it anyway because I had no choice. I took out a payday loan. Then another. The interest rates were criminal, the kind that trapped people in cycles of debt for years. But I didn't care. I needed $12,000, and I needed it within a week. I borrowed from my buddy at the warehouse, promised him I'd pay him back double. He looked at me like I was crazy, but he lent me $500 anyway. 6 days after meeting Silver, I walked back into his office with $12,000 in cash. Mostly 20s and 50s, rubber-banded in stacks. Probably looking like I'd robbed a convenience store. My hands shook as I put it on his desk. This was everything. Every dollar I could scrape together, beg for, or steal for my own future. If this didn't work, I wasn't just broke. I was buried. Silver counted it without expression. then had his secretary write me a receipt. He told me it would take approximately 2 weeks to get official documentation from Bulgaria. Maybe 3. The government offices they're moved at their own pace. But he'd put a rush on it, mark it as time-sensitive, do everything he could to expedite. He asked me one question before I left. He asked me what I'd do if the documents came back showing Elena was legally divorced, if this whole theory was wrong, if that Instagram comment had been a mistake or a lie or just someone trolling. I told him the truth. I'd be destroyed, financially ruined for years, working off debt until I was 40. But at least I'd know I tried. At least I'd know I'd fought for Dad instead of just rolling over. Silver nodded like he understood. Then he told me something I'll never forget. He said that in his 40 years of practice, he'd learned that the universe has a way of balancing scales. Not always fast, not always obvious. But eventually, he said people who commit fraud usually aren't doing it for the first time. They have a pattern, and patterns leave trails. I left his office with a receipt for $12,000 and nothing else. No guarantees, no certainty, just hope and debt in equal measure. That same afternoon, I drove past my old house, Dad's house, my house, the house Elena had stolen, and I saw something that made my blood freeze. A real estate sign in the front yard, bright red and white, for sale. I pulled over and stared at it. She was selling. She was actually selling. The house Dad had worked his entire life to pay off. The house where I'd grown up, where Mom had died, where Dad and I had our Friday night ritual. Elena was selling it like it was just another asset to liquidate. I called the number on the sign, pretended to be an interested buyer. The realtor was chatty, excited. She told me the property was priced to move. The seller was motivated. There was already a cash offer on the table. Closing schedule for 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks. I did the math. Silver said 2 to 3 weeks for the Bulgarian documents. The house was selling in 2 weeks. If Elena closed that sale and converted everything to cash, she'd disappear. Take the house money, take the lottery money that was probably being processed right now, and vanish to somewhere without extradition. Bulgaria, maybe, or somewhere in Southeast Asia. Somewhere she could live like a queen and never worry about American law again. The window was closing. I'd made my bet, put everything on the table, but the wheel was still spinning, and I had no idea where it would land. Those were the longest 10 days of my life, longer than the 4 months after Dad died, longer than any span of time I'd ever experienced. Every morning I'd wake up in my motel room and check my phone, hoping for a message from Silver's office. Every night I'd go to sleep with nothing but anxiety and dwindling hope. I drove past the house every day, watched the moving trucks come, watched Elena direct men carrying furniture out to the curb or into trucks. She was stripping the place bare, removing every trace of Dad's life, every trace of my life, preparing for her exit. I parked down the street and watched like some kind of stalker. Maybe I was. Maybe I'd become exactly the kind of person I used to feel sorry for, desperate and broken and clinging to vengeance because there was nothing else left to cling to. But I didn't care anymore. This wasn't about pride or dignity. This was about justice or revenge. Honestly, at that point, I couldn't tell the difference anymore. On day 9, I was sitting in my car across from the house, watching another load of furniture get hauled away when my phone rang. Silver's office. I answered so fast, I almost dropped the phone. Silver's voice came through the speaker telling me to come to his office immediately. He said I wasn't going to believe what they'd found. The way he said it, with that edge of something that might have been satisfaction or might have been shock, made my heart start hammering against my ribs. I broke every speed limit getting downtown, parked illegally, and ran up to his office. The receptionist waved me through like she'd been expecting me. Silver was at his desk with a folder in front of him, a thick folder, official-looking documents with seals and stamps. He told me to sit down. I sat. Then he opened the folder and started explaining. The documents had come through from Bulgaria, Plovdiv Municipal Records Office, birth certificates, marriage certificates, the works. And Elena's file was a goldmine of fraud. She'd married Ivan Petrov in 2005. Traditional Bulgarian wedding. All official and legal and documented. They'd had a daughter together in 2007. Sophia. The same Sophia who'd left that Instagram comment that started this entire chain of events. But here's the thing. Here's the beautiful, damning thing. There was no divorce, no annulment, no legal termination of that marriage. Ivan and Elena were still married according to Bulgarian law. Still married when she applied for her K-1 fiancé visa to come to America. Still married when she met Dad. Still married when she married Dad in a courthouse in Cleveland. Silver pulled out her visa application. He'd gotten copies through official channels. In the section asking about previous marriages, Elena had checked never married. It was right there in black and white. A federal immigration document with a lie on it. A lie that had gotten her into the country. A lie that had allowed her to marry Dad. A lie that had given her access to everything she'd stolen. Silver explained the legal implications in terms that were crystal clear. Her marriage to Dad was void ab initio. That's Latin for void from the beginning. Not invalid starting from today. Invalid from the moment it happened. It never legally existed, which meant she'd never been Dad's wife, which meant she'd never been entitled to the house through joint tenancy, which meant every claim she'd made was based on fraud. The house, the lottery money, the life insurance, all of it was built on a marriage that never legally existed. She wasn't a widow. She was a scam artist who'd gotten caught. But it got better. Silver had done his homework. He'd contacted Ivan through official channels. Ivan was pissed, furious. His wife had abandoned him and their daughter a decade ago, came to America and cut off all contact. He'd been raising Sophia alone, working 2 jobs, wondering where his wife had gone. He'd never signed divorce papers because there hadn't been any divorce papers. Elena had just vanished. Ivan had cooperated fully with Silver's investigation, provided documents, signed affidavits. He wanted Elena held accountable. Not for himself, he said, but for Sophia. Their daughter deserved better than to be abandoned. Silver laid out the charges Elena was facing. Visa fraud, a federal crime. Bigamy, a state crime in Ohio. Marriage fraud, another federal crime. She was looking at serious prison time even before you factored in the financial fraud of stealing inheritance she was entitled to. I sat in that office staring at documents covered in Cyrillic letters and official stamps, feeling something shift in my chest. For 4 months, I'd been the victim, the person things happened to, the one who got crushed by systems I didn't understand. But now, holding these papers, I was something different. I was the hammer instead of the nail. Silver asked me what I wanted to do. We could go to the local police, file a criminal complaint, let the system grind forward slowly. That would take time, though. Months probably, maybe years for everything to work through courts. And in the meantime, Elena might slip away. She was scheduled to close on the house in 48 hours. Once she had that cash, she'd be gone. Or, Silver said we could go federal. Contact Homeland Security investigations. HSI dealt with immigration fraud. They moved fast when the case was solid. And this case was concrete. Documents, affidavits, a confession from the abandoned husband, an unsigned visa application with a lie on it. This was the kind of case HSI loved because it was easy. No gray areas. No ambiguity. Just fraud in black and white. Silver asked me what I wanted to do. Did I want to file a police report and wait, or did I want to call HSI and strike while we had the chance? I looked at those documents, thought about Dad, about Friday nights in the garage, about his excitement when we won and his death a few hours later, about Elena slipping that unsigned lottery ticket into her pocket while he was dying on the floor, about the 4 months I'd spent sleeping in my car and in a motel room while she paraded around Cleveland spending his money. I told Silver we were calling HSI, and then we were going to that title company closing. I was going to watch Elena's face when the federal government walked in and destroyed her. Silver smiled. Not a warm smile, a professional smile. The smile of a lawyer who was about to absolutely wreck someone's life in a completely legal way. He picked up his phone and started making calls. The title company closing was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. Silver had coordinated with HSI. They'd send agents to the title office. They wanted to catch her in the act of committing more fraud, try to sell property she had no legal right to. It would make the case even stronger. More charges to stack on top of the existing pile. The night before the closing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my motel bed staring at the water-stained ceiling, thinking about what tomorrow would bring. Justice, revenge, vindication, or maybe all three at once. I thought about Dad, wondered if he was watching somehow, if he knew what was about to happen. I'd gotten the $12,000 together in 6 days. The documents had come through in 10. Everything had moved faster than Silver expected, like the universe had decided it was time to balance those scales he'd talked about, like Dad's ghost was pushing things along, making sure justice got served while there was still time. Wednesday afternoon, I put on the only decent clothes I still owned. Khakis and a button-down shirt I'd bought at Goodwill back when I thought I might need them for job interviews. I looked at myself in the motel bathroom mirror. I looked older than 24. Harder. For months of poverty and rage had carved something into my face that hadn't been there before. I drove downtown to the title company. Silver was waiting outside, standing next to 2 people in dark suits who had that unmistakable federal agent look. Serious, alert, wearing earpieces. One was a woman in her 40s, the other a man about the same age. They introduced themselves as Special Agents Morrison and Chun from Homeland Security Investigations. They'd reviewed the case file. They were ready. The plan was simple. Let Elena start the closing. Let her think she'd won. Then I'd walk in. Then HSI would make the arrest. Maximum impact. Maximum psychological damage. Silver said I didn't have to be there for that part, but I told him I needed to see her face. Needed to watch the moment she realized she'd lost. We waited outside for 20 minutes. Then Agent Morrison got a message on her phone. The signing had started. It was time. The title office was on the 3rd floor of a renovated building that used to be a warehouse. Exposed brick walls and industrial lighting, trying hard to look modern and sophisticated. We took the elevator up. I could hear my heart beating in my ears. Everything felt surreal, like a movie, like this was happening to someone else, and I was just watching. The conference room had glass walls. I could see Elena inside before we opened the door. She was dressed like she was going to a gala. Expensive suit, hair and makeup perfect. She was sitting at the table with a title officer and a real estate agent, laughing about something. On the table in front of her was a bottle of champagne. She'd brought champagne to celebrate stealing my father's house. Agent Morrison opened the door. I followed her in. Agent Chun came in last and closed the door behind us. Elena looked up, saw me. Her face went from confused to annoyed in about half a second. She said something about security, about calling someone to remove a trespasser. Her voice had that edge of contempt I remember from all those times in the garage when Dad's back was turned. I just smiled, told her I hadn't come alone. That's when Morrison and Chen pulled out their credentials. HSI badges, federal agents. The room went very quiet very fast. The title officer and the real estate agent looked like they wanted to disappear into the walls. Agent Morrison identified herself and Chun. Then she said the words that made everything worth it. She told Elena she was under arrest for federal immigration fraud and bigamy. The room seemed to tilt. Elena's face went from annoyed to shocked to pale in the space of 3 seconds. She tried to stand up, but her legs didn't want to work. She sat back down hard. Her hands started shaking so badly she dropped the pen she'd been holding. I stepped forward and put a folder on the table in front of her. Inside was a photograph. Her wedding to Ivan Petrov in Bulgaria, 2005. Young Elena in a white dress, standing next to a young man, both of them smiling. Behind them you could see Cyrillic letters on a building. Very clearly not Cleveland, Ohio. I told her Ivan said hello, that we'd talked, that he'd been very helpful to the investigation, that he'd been waiting for divorce papers for 15 years, and finally understood why they'd never come. Elena's face went from pale to gray. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She was trying to process what was happening, trying to find an angle, trying to see the escape route. But there wasn't one. Not this time. Agent Chen pulled out handcuffs, started reading her rights in that flat, official tone that made it clear this wasn't a negotiation or a conversation. This was an arrest. This was a federal government exercising its authority over someone who'd committed federal crimes. Elena found her voice then, started talking in Bulgarian, rapid-fire words I couldn't understand but could definitely interpret from the tone. Panic, anger, denial. Chun just kept reading the rights. Morrison asked her if she understood them. Elena switched to English, said this was a mistake, that she could explain everything. But her voice was shaking and her hands were shaking, and everyone in the room could see she was lying. The handcuff went on. Click, click. Two sounds that meant everything had changed. Two sounds that meant justice had arrived, late but thorough. Two sounds that meant Dad had been avenged. As they led her toward the door, Elena turned back and looked at me, really looked at me for maybe the first time since she'd moved into our house 3 years ago. Her eyes were wide, terrified, looking for mercy or understanding or something human. I just stared back. No anger, no satisfaction, just cold observation of a predator finally caught in a trap of her own making. She said something as they took her out, in Bulgarian again, probably a curse, probably calling me every name she could think of. I didn't care. The words didn't matter. What mattered was the sound of the handcuffs and the sight of federal agents walking her out of that office and into a future that included prison and deportation and the complete destruction of everything she'd built on lies. The title officer sat there in shock. The real estate agent kept saying she had no idea, that she'd been told this was all legitimate. Silver assured them they weren't in trouble. The sale was void anyway. Elena had never had legal right to property in the first place. The house belonged to David's estate, which meant belonged to his only legal heir, me. The bottle of champagne sat on the table, unopened. Celebration canceled. Dream destroyed. I wondered if this was how Elena had felt watching Dad die. This mixture of shock and loss, and the sudden realization that everything you'd counted on was evaporating. I hope so. I really hope so. The legal process after that was surprisingly fast. When the fraud is obvious and federal agencies are involved, things move quickly. Elena's marriage to Dad was declared void of initio by the court. Joint tenancy dissolved because it was based on a fraudulent marriage. The house reverted to Dad's estate. As his only child and legal heir, everything came to me. The lottery ticket was trickier. Elena had already claimed it, already had access to the money. But because she'd obtained it through fraud, specifically by stealing it from Dad while he was dying and then claiming it based on a marriage that didn't exist, the court ordered the money returned. Restitution. All $18 million plus interest. Elena was charged federally with visa fraud and marriage fraud. The state of Ohio charged her with bigamy. She pled guilty to avoid trial, probably hoping for leniency. She got 8 years in federal prison followed by deportation. 8 years in a cage followed by a one-way ticket back to Bulgaria and Ivan and the daughter she'd abandoned. I didn't go to the sentencing hearing. Silver represented me. He said Elena cried and apologized and claimed she just wanted a better life. The judge didn't care. Federal judges tend not to sympathize with people who commit multi-year fraud schemes. 8 years. Deportation. Case closed. 6 months after Elena's arrest, I was sitting in Dad's garage. My garage now. I'd moved back into the house. Hadn't sold it like Elena planned to. This was my home. Dad's home, where we'd build our Friday night ritual and our dream together. Why would I sell it? I'd renovated the place. New paint, new flooring. Removed every trace of Elena like she was a bad stain that needed scrubbing out. The house felt clean again, like Dad's spirit could rest there without her poison contaminating everything. I kept the garage exactly how it was though. Dad's workbench, his tools, the flickering fluorescent light we'd never bothered to fix, the chair where he sat every Friday night. It all stayed. This was sacred space. This was where we dreamed together. On the workbench in front of me was Dad's old notebook. 5 years of lottery data. Numbers and patterns and graphs drawn by hand. The last page had our winning numbers circled in red pen. Beside the notebook was a photograph of Dad from my high school graduation, both of us grinning like idiots because the future seemed bright. I'd taken care of something important a few weeks earlier. Silver had helped me track down Ivan and Sophia in Bulgaria. Sophia was 19 now, old enough to be in university, but working instead because Ivan couldn't afford tuition on his salary. She was smart, Silver said, deserved a chance. I'd wired her $100,000. Enough for university. Enough for her to build a life better than the one her mother had abandoned her to. She hadn't asked for it, didn't know it was coming. But Silver said when she got the notification, she cried, called it a miracle. I didn't do it for karma or redemption or to be noble. I did it because Sophia had left that Instagram comment. That one moment of anger at her mother's lies had triggered everything that followed. She'd given me justice without even knowing it. $100,000 was the least I could do. The rest of the money I'd invested. Carefully, conservatively, the way Dad would have wanted. $9 million doesn't mean you stop being smart about finances. It just means you have more room to breathe, more room to dream. I'd started a consulting business I'd always planned. Small so far. Just me and a couple contractors. But it was growing, making real money beyond a lottery windfall. Building something that mattered. Something Dad would have been proud of. I still bought lottery tickets every Friday. Just one. Same ritual Dad and I had. Not because I needed the money. Because it kept him close. Because some traditions are more important than logic. I picked up Dad's photo and looked at him. Really looked at him. That goofy graduation grin. That pride in his eyes. That love for his son that had never wavered. Not even when he'd married a woman who turned out to be a monster. I said out loud, to the empty garage and his picture, and maybe his ghost, if such things exist, that we'd won. The system had failed us at first, but in the end, the math worked out. Justice found its way home. The 50-50 split happened exactly like we planned. Half to him through Sophia, making sure his stepdaughter got the education and future her mother had stolen from her. Half to me, building a life he'd be proud of. 50-50, Dad, just like we promised. The fluorescent light flickered above me, same as it always had. The garage smelled like motor oil and old paper and possibility. Outside, Cleveland was still gray and cold and industrial. But in here, in this space, there was warmth. There was memory. There was the ghost of a dream that had come true despite everything. I sat there until dark, notebook open, Dad's photo propped against the wall, feeling something I hadn't felt in almost a year. Peace. Not happiness exactly. Not joy. Just peace. The peace that comes from knowing you fought for what was right and won. The peace that comes from honoring someone you loved in the only way that mattered. Elena was in prison. The money was home where it belonged. Sophia had her future. And I had this garage and these memories and this connection to a man who taught me that patience and faith and showing up every week could change your life. The system had crushed me at first. But in the end, through luck and determination, and one angry daughter's Instagram comment, the system had given me justice. I didn't know what happened to Elena after prison. Didn't care. She was someone else's problem now. Someone else's cautionary tale. She'd be 60 when she got out. Would return to Bulgaria with nothing. No money, no prospects, no family who wanted her. Just the consequences of her choices, following her like shadows. That was enough for me. That was justice. I closed Dad's notebook and turned off the light, locked up the garage, went inside the house that was finally, legally, rightfully mine. Tomorrow I had meetings, clients to call, a business to run, a life to build. But tonight, I'd honored Dad the way he deserved. Tonight I'd sat in our sacred space and felt his presence and knew, absolutely knew, that he was proud of what I'd done. We'd made our 50-50 deal on a Friday night in February. We'd won $18 million. He died 6 hours later. She'd stolen everything. The system had failed. And then Through persistence and luck and one deleted comment that I'd screenshotted just in time, everything had been set right again. The universe balances scales. Silver had said, not always fast, not always obvious. But eventually, he'd been right. The scales had balanced. Dad's legacy was protected. His son had survived and thrived. His stolen dreams had been returned. And somewhere in Bulgaria, a young woman named Sophia was starting university with $100,000 she hadn't expected, sent by the stepbrother she'd never met, in thanks for one angry comment that had torn down her mother's house of lies. 50-50, Dad. We won, just like you said we would.